Hi there, folks, and welcome to our webinar today, Gamification Crash Course, as part of our Getting Your Training Tech on Point webinar series. We're about 13 minutes away from our official start time, so if you are checking this out on the video recording, you may want to fast forward 13 minutes. In just a few minutes, we'll start our sound check and some of our pre-session activities. Up until then, we wish you all the very best for the upcoming webinar. And welcome to the webinar room, Nick. Thanks for joining us. We're about 10 minutes away from our official start time for our webinar today, Gamification Crash Course. My name is Mark Reckliff. I'm your host today. So if you need to grab a heart starter, a coffee, a tea, a glass of water or juice or something similar, now's a good time. We'll be starting some sound checks and some other pre-session activities real soon. So, folks, we're going to do a quick sound check now. If you could let me know in the chat box if you can hear me loud and clear, that would be awesome. This will be preceded by some additional music to get our heads in the space and our minds in the right kind of mood for our session today, all about the Gamification Crash Course. Thanks so much, Nick. I appreciate that. Hi there, folks, and welcome to everyone that's in our webinar room. Thanks to Nick, who was here nice and early, as well as Jackie and Phil, who've just joined us in the last few minutes. Welcome to our webinar today, all about the gamification crash course. As part of our webinar series this week, that's really putting a deep dive into using technology tools and making them work for us in that training and assessment situation. Notice that Deborah's just joined us also in the chat room. In the webinar room. So thanks for joining us today and making sure that we're here on time. We're about 5 minutes away from our official start time, 11 o'clock Brisbane time. So 5 minutes away from that. In the meantime, I've got a pre-session thinkable to get your head around. And this activity is called Name the Game. So you've got 5 images on your screen right now. And see if you can guess what these games are. Each of them are different games. There's one that's a book, another one that's a single, a music single. Then we've got a television show, a movie, and a board game. So using the chat box feature, let me know if you can guess what these are. Also, feel free to let me know where you're joining us from today. And hopefully you're staying nice and warm and or dry, depending on where you are joining us around the country. Now, notice, Deborah, that you do have your hand up feature at this particular stage. So I'm not sure if there's a question you've got, or you're just letting me know that you're there. If you've got a question, feel free to pop that in the chat box and I will get back to you as soon as we can. So, team, for those who have just joined us after we did our previous information about where I was joining you from, I'm actually joining you from a town called Duluth, which is in the northern part of Minnesota in the USA. And that's where I've been for the last 13 months or so, being caught up with the old COVID situation. But listen, there are worse places to be stuck, I'm sure. But glad to have you with us today as part of our webinar series. Nick's gone straight into the guesses here. First one is the Hunger Games. I think we're on track. And then we've got Chris Isaac's song, Wicked Game. So definitely, I think you're onto a winning combination there in this Name the Game quiz. I will reveal all of the answers after our official introduction too, by the way. So you won't have to lose sleep tonight not knowing what these names of the games are. Still got 3 to go. See if you can work out what these name of the games actually are. On Phil's going for the big money here. Not sure of the second one, but we did get the second one there, which was Chris Isaac's Wicked Game. So well done. Game of Thrones, yes, on track there. Not sure about the fourth one. I will say that the fourth one there on the row there, a bit of a phone a friend in this particular case. That's obviously Benedict Cumberbatch, and there's a film there where he was playing the role of a code breaker. So that might help you out a little bit on that particular one there. And then we have guessed here from Phil, the Game of Life. So yes, I think we've got 4 of the 5 guesses now in our Name the Game. Just a minute away from our official start. So if you've got one more guess, what do we think that movie is with Benedict Cumberbatch? The Imitation Game. Well done, Nick. I think we're 5 for 5. Fantastic effort. Got it in there just in time before we started. Good job. And welcome to Justin and Bill, who've just joined us in the webinar room. And it's just about to go top of the hour, folks. So we'll start our opening slides. So welcome, folks, to our webinar series this week, which is all about getting your training tech on point. It's our webinar series, 5 of the best this week. And today on Hump Day, we're talking about the gamification crash course. And thanks so much for spending some time with us today. My name is Mark Ratcliffe. Well, all my details are on the screen right away. The reason I popped it up at the beginning is to let you know you can contact me after the webinar if you've got any questions about how you might want to implement some of the things that we've talked about today, or even let me know how it went when you put into practice some of the concepts or content of our webinar today. Now, if you're new to Zoom, I just wanted to go through the dashboard very quickly to make sure that we can benefit from all of our communication situations. Bottom left, we'll see the audio settings. It will be a little different depending on your version of the app, particularly if you're joining us on an iPad or something like that. But generally speaking, we've got an audio settings function there, which lets you get the sweet spot for the sound. The key thing in terms of our communication is often through the chat window, where you've all been pretty much onto that one and on the money with our Name the Game activity early. So when we use the chat box, the thing I will ask you here to do is to make sure that we post to all panelists and attendees, and that way everybody benefits from the contributions that you make. We also have the raise the hand feature there. At different times throughout the webinar, I'll invite you to raise your hand. In many cases, just to let me know what you're thinking, whether you agree or disagree with something as we go through, or just to confirm whether you're getting something in the way that it's intended. And then finally here, if you do need to leave the webinar for whatever meeting, click the Leave Meeting button. Don't be too concerned if you have to go out in a hurry. You will still benefit from a copy of the recording and a PDF copy in this case, of all the slides, so you won't miss anything as a result of our time together today. Now, I am going to quickly test that hands up feature. So if you can find it on your dashboard and put the hands up feature and let me know if you can hear me loud and clear, that would be awesome. And it's great to see so many hands go up, all of the hands going up, which is just fantastic. So I'll lower those hands now. And what I wanted to do quickly now is to get a sense for what kind of roles that you're involved in within the vet space, within an RTO setting. So let me just launch that poll quickly there. So are you a CEO, perhaps an owner of an RTO compliance manager, vet coordinator, trainer, assessor, consultant, or maybe you perform some other important role within the vet sector? If that sounds like you, pop that in the chat box, because we want to make sure that you're also honored as a result of our time together. And thanks so much for taking the time to answer that one. I'll end that poll now since you've all voted, and I'll share those results. So at this stage, the majority of those joining us live today are trainers and assessors at 38%, but a smattering of other important jobs across the vet sector. So let's quickly make that disappear. What I'll also do is I'll come on and be a friendly person. How are you? We get to see the face that was made for radio. But listen, I'm with you, Dave, for today's webinar. And we will move on and look at our overview for today's session. So during our session today, we're going to start off by looking at what gamification is. I wanted to give it a face. So we've got a definition for what it is, and then we'll build that layer upon layer as we move through our session today. As part of that, I want to share with you 7 steps to creating a dynamic gamification situation. And it's these 7 steps we'll come back to at the end of the webinar to give you a chance to map your own situation. So these are going to be super important for you to be able to implement to create great gamification options for you and your students. During the process also, I'll share with you 5 types of game rewards. Now, some of these are going to be more relevant than others, depending on your course and your cohort, but I've given you 5 here, and there should be 1 or 2 of those that will be a great fit for your students. I'll also share 3 key gamification platforms that you'll be able to use to create or recreate those 7 steps and 5 types of rewards that we're talking about today. And before we finish up the webinar, I will give you a chance to reflect upon your own situation and think about what you'll do next in terms of mapping your own gamification journey. And I will open up some time at the end for questions and consider some of the actions you'll take after our webinar together. Now, we did have a chance to have that Name the Game activity, which was a pre-session activity, and we nailed it, 5 from 5. So number 1 there to the left was the Hunger Games, I should say, which is a book by Suzanne Collins, which was, of course, famously made into a film starring Jennifer Lawrence. Then one of my favorite songs of all time, 1991, Chris Isaak, Wicked game, the haunting crooner himself. Then we had Game of Thrones, TV series made by HBO, of course, based on the fantasy novels by George R.R. Martin. The trickier one, but we did get it in the end, so well done. It is The Imitation Game, which was a movie starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley, based on a math genius and World War II codebreaker Alan Turing. And then finally, we had the classic board game, Game of Life, originally created by Milton Bradley back in 1860. How time flies. So well done. We got all 5 for there, and just a different variation of a game we can play. If you're doing your own webinars, it's always good to see different activities that could be used as part of a pre-session set. So let's move on with our content team. And I did share all the answers there, I should say. We've got our 5 there. We'll look at our first order of business on our agenda, which is what is gamification? What does it mean in the context of education? Well, first of all, gamification theory in education is that learners learn best when they're also having fun. It's something that I often say to my students. And when I was a school teacher, I used to say the same thing. Learning is fun. It can be fun. And I think the best types of learning will often end up creating the atmosphere of fun. And it doesn't always feel like it's hard work. It feels like they are pushing each other for higher success. So I guess that's part of what I like to see in a learning environment, whether it's online or in a face-to-face context. Gamification in learning, though, involves game-based elements such as point scoring, peer competition, and teamwork to drive engagement. In many ways, it's about building a game-like atmosphere in a non-game-like environment or context. So obviously, when we're playing a sport, we're used to having rules and bells and whistles and activities and collaboration and so forth. But in that learning situation, we're taking those same elements and using it to drive results and drive engagement. And then finally, gamification applies a combination of game mechanics and game design techniques to motivate the learners. And I want to spend a little bit of time up front here looking at the difference between those two things, game mechanics and game design. So there's a great graphic on your screen now that looks at game mechanics. And I really like it because of its simplicity, but it really helps us to think about the journey we're trying to create for our learners. And we're trying to find that game mechanic zen there, the balance between it being too hard or too confusing and therefore frustrating our learners before they even get started, or is it just too easy and they walk away from it because they're bored? So ultimately, when we think about the journey, people start off with, relatively easy, relatively straightforward, but the complexity and sophistication increases with time, and that keeps them in the game. And that's something to sort of think about when we are developing our own gamification situations. Even if you think about some of the game shows, things like the Millionaire Game or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, those first questions are easy, they're the low-hanging fruit. But then they get more complex as they get closer to the $1 million. And that's quite deliberate in that setting. So we're sort of creating a similar type of game mechanic zen according to our diagram. On the other side, we've got game design. And game design is the art of applying design and aesthetics to create a game for either entertainment, recreation, or indeed in our situation, for educational purposes. So getting the right kind of design and the look and feel so that people actually are engaged by it, motivated by it, and they kind of believe in it. They say, yes, this is something that's happening to me, and this is kind of cool. Now, by all means, this is certainly something that's not new. I mean, more than 100 years ago, we had Baden-Powell and the Scouts back in 1907, where they had things like merit badges, which they, of course, they still have today. The Scouts and guiding associations, they still have merit badges and the like that are awarded when you attain proficiency, or you can prove learning, or you've got a new skill in completion of a task. And much like our game Zen from before, those tasks get progressively more difficult and more complex, which then spurs those folks on to want to do it. So gamification is not new, but it's a matter of how we put it together to create these dynamic environments and experiences for our learner. Now, if you're a child of the 80s like me, you might remember this next game. It was one of the first widespread uses of gamification within education. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? A quick show of hands if you remember playing this, or you've seen it played either in its original incarnation back in the mid-80s, or indeed in its rebooting of it on things like PlayStation and whatnot. So we've got a few hands raised at this stage, so you do remember it like I did as well. For those that are unfamiliar with Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, you had to sort of demonstrate an understanding of culture and geography and social studies and history to be able to decipher clues to find out, where in the world was Carmen Sandiego, who was, a criminal by all, manner of speaking, but we're sort of on the trail of Carmen Sandiego. Where were they going to next? And we had to kind of work that one out. But again, it made it fun, it made it interesting, but it was like the learning was happening, because even if we got it wrong, we then had to go and research, well, okay, we picked the wrong location. What would be the right location? Let's do some more research. So again, it helped to create other foundations to extend upon the learning. So it's a great example of a lot of the stuff that happened in the 80s, where with each failure, as it were, we got one step closer to success. And that certainly helped to create resilience in the learning and self-sufficiency, rather than just giving up because we're already invested. Again, the game mechanic Zen was there because the early clues were relatively straightforward, and they became more difficult and complex the further into the chase for Carmen Sandiego. And then we fast forward to 2021, and you've got organizations like the Virtual Running Club, who pivoted during the pandemic to continue to allow people to connect with others and stay fit and continue running in their homes or around their yards and whatnot, because they weren't able to do things like your 5K runs and whatnot, given the social distancing situations. And this is just a really clever situation there, because what they're doing here is they're allowing you to have all of those same sorts of difficulties where you can push yourself up to the next level, greater distances, you can compete against time, you can do things against your personal best. You can also do more knowledge-based things where you're learning about nutrition and fitness and physiology and all this sort of stuff. And as you reach each milestone, you're able to get access to merchandise as your reward. Now, you do pay for this. This is not a free thing. But in terms of gamification, I just want to give you an example of the evolution over time. And now we've got a lot more of these app-based things where people can kind of track their progress on their own devices. And of course, we can do the same sort of thing within a traditional learning situation. My wife is actually a member of this virtual running club, and she's an early childhood teacher at heart. She now teaches this at higher education, one of the reasons why we found ourselves in the USA. But she's got the Sesame Street competition. So if you were to click on this website there and check out the merch, you can join a club that's all about Sesame Street merch. And as you get certain distances, they'll just send it out in the mail to you, which I think is kind of cool, which also kind of eggs you on and creates a certain sense of motivation. So let's deep dive now into those 7 steps for creating dynamic gamification. You're going to help me along the journey too by giving me some examples or suggestions about what's working and perhaps how it can be extended for your own situation as well. So number 1 on the list here is all about transparency. And this is a really important part when it comes to gamification, because there does need to be an end game. People need to understand the journey they're on and what they have to do to accomplish the goal. So early on, we have to explain the journey and why they are playing. Now, whether it's connected to content, whether it's a checking for understanding quiz, whether it's a way to supplement perhaps their other learning, they need to know the reason why, and that will give them the buy-in to the reason why they continue to actually do the task. This kind of transparency is reminiscent in pretty much every type of gameplay that you would use. You think about some of the mobile games here, such as Candy Crush. The first thing you'll see once you get into it is you've got certain tasks to do, and once you reach those tasks, you then move on to the next level. Again, it applies that same thinking. The first stages are relatively easy, and then they get harder and harder as you go through. If you think of a more traditional education situation, you might set up your journey a bit like this, What I like about this example is it's very transparent about all the different things that you're doing, including the activities where there's a game element to it, whether that be the game break here, even the Q&A could be gamified, or the quiz, or the checking for understanding. And you can give points or award points for completing the survey on time as well, which can be added to that gamification experience. Now, another way to look at this, the guys at Elucidat, they really specialize in e-learning services, and really beautiful stuff there too, by the way. If you are looking for a new way of hosting e-learning, check these guys out. And you've got more of a template type situation there, where you click the tab, but you can kind of see these are the 5 stages of the journey. We kind of know the direction we're in. And if you want to look at something that a lot of organizations in our space use, something like Canvas, again, the same thing happens. These are all our courses, and on the coming up, it's telling us these are our key milestones of things that need to be accomplished. And of course, we could quite easily add points and rewards for completing certain things at certain times. So at this stage, folks, I've got a quick question for you to reflect upon, and this is it. How could we create transparency during our game design? Think about something that you're teaching right now, or training and assessing right now. Think about how you could create a transparency to a game that might help you to reinforce the content related to that course or that topic. So your best ideas in the chat box, folks. How could we create transparency during our game design? So Nick says we could link it to the course outcome. So again, we're mapping that and creating those really great relationships. I think that's a clever idea, Nick. So well done. That might also overcome folks that think, oh, I don't want to play a game. Games are not part of learning. They'd be wrong, by the way. I think that there's a really important connection between gameplay and learning, but in any case, some people think that the two should be separated. But if they can see that this particular game has a direct relationship to the course outcomes, they're more likely to play. So I'm with you on that one. Use language in the game that links to the course content, which is a follow-up comment from Nick, and I think that's a way to create those relationships. Mohammed says here, provide snapshots of the units of competency, again, creating those really nice links there so they can see the seriousness of the connections back to content, and rather than it just being something to fill time, it's actually something meaningful and worthwhile related to the course. And Phil says here, in line with the legislation and policies required to be followed. And you can get some really interesting imagery there with that, particularly on a map type situation, or maybe a wire frame, where you can actually start to see the real life situations where this content is going to be applied. So I think that's a really clever idea too, Phil. So thanks for that. And Deborah says here, set the rules of the games nice and early so that they know what they have to do, what their commitment is, how much they have to do individually, whether it needs to be done as part of teamwork or a problem-solving task, and so on and so forth. And Mohammed also says here, what is the outcome of the course or the unit? So if you decide to have a really nice sort of infographic type look, being able to connect the dots back to the unit, I think is a good idea. So some great, wonderful contributions in the chat box, folks. Thanks for that. I think they're all really noteworthy when it comes to this idea of transparency. So next, and this is a nice segue into our next point there. It's all about setting the goals. So we know what they have to do in the game. Now let's start to be very clear about what our expectations are from that particular game. And when we're thinking goals, you've got individual goals. So you might invite them to have goals for themselves. You might have group-based goals. So again, every person might have a different job to do. And as they combine all of those tasks, then they complete the overall activity. And then, of course, you've got the program goals, which they have to attain to get their statement of attainment or their qualification. Now, to go back with my fitness theme, folks, the guys at Runkeeper do a really great job of this, because in their app, you can set your own goals for fitness, things like water intake or even nutrition again, and you can see how you perform against your friends, your family and colleagues. And you can easily do this in the RTO space as well, where your learners choose their own learning activities. You might give them a bit of a smorgasbord and they say, I'll choose this one, and this one, as they relate to reinforcing certain content. They could also choose how many hours they'd like to spend on the study, particularly as people are studying things self-paced. You might get them to commit to 10 or 15 hours a week, and that goes into their learning journey. And there might be a range of other learning and assessment milestones you allow them to have input on. I find that if people are having input on their own goals, they're more likely to follow through, rather than simply saying, here's our standard journey, and they have no commitment to that per se. Yes, they've paid and they've enrolled, but they've had no role necessarily in choosing what happens to them and when. Number 3 on the list here, team, is all about competition. Now, when we talk about competition, this isn't necessarily competition in a bad sense where you've got winners and losers. We often use the environment or the atmosphere of competition to spur people on, to kind of encourage them to stretch a bit further because they're trying to just outdo the person next to them. But at the same time, what they're doing is they're seeing their own capacity increase, and maybe they can do things that they didn't think were possible before. And rather than just competition, I like to frame it a little differently, and I call it wholesome competition, because everybody can win. We're simply using a competitive angle to spur people on and motivate people. So another quick question here for the discussion: provide some examples about how wholesome competition can be achieved. And when you're thinking about this one, you might want to think about high tech as well as low tech solution. So how can we create that wholesome competition? Best thoughts in the chat box, folks. Mohammed says here it's all about communication channels and enabling people maybe to bounce off each other, where you get sometimes that sense of best from the rest. As one idea comes up, somebody else comes up with another idea, and so on and so forth. Phil's got a great idea here in the chat box: the fastest finger first to submit responses. So you can use platforms such as Kahoot or Quizalize or Quiziz. And I'll talk about some of those a little bit later on in the session, where you can actually get the analytics that tells you who responded through their device first and how quick they responded to that answer. So that's a really clever idea too from Phil. Nick adds here, when the answers aren't black and white, no right or wrong answers, you can have them in a situation where they can start to justify their response or play the devil's advocate, let's say, and that can really be used in a nice wholesomely competitive way where everyone's trying to see it from lots of different perspectives. So some nice ideas there again. From my perspective, I think there are 3 key considerations when it comes to competition. The first one is, are we going to have them compete as an individual against other individuals? Okay, that's certainly appropriate. It's a very common way of doing things. Do you want them to compete as a team against other teams? Now, later on, when we share some of the different platforms, I'll give you free options. There's also premium paid for options. Some of the free ones kind of limit how many people can participate. So it lends itself to more of a team approach. That way you've got a single device at a table rather than everybody competing against each other, and you get within the license to do it for free. So it's a quick tip there for new players. And then, of course, you've got the idea of competing against yourself. So rather than competing against others, you're going for that personal best, and everyone's going to be on a different journey there, and that's okay. This is something, I guess, depending on your workplace, might be linked to development plans as opposed to things that end in a statement of attainment, let's say. So you might combine the best of both worlds there. Number 4 in our 7 steps here is collaboration. And for me, this is one of the most important parts of getting gamification right. We are better together. Collaboration is such an important part of learning generally, but an even more important part of gameplay. And if you don't believe me, have a look at some of those multiplayer games and how much money those guys make, because it's incredible at how people get a sense of community and connectedness when they're playing simultaneously, but they're also together on the same team, but sharing different skills to solve a task, complete a mission, or something similar, as opposed to just one person against the world. So there's definitely something in that in terms of people's buy-in, and they'll stay longer generally when they're kind of accountable to or for other people in their team. So when it comes to why collaboration, this leads to higher order thinking. It boosts confidence and self-esteem. It also builds the best from the rest approach I was talking about from before. Sometimes we just don't have all the answers ourselves, but when we can bounce off other people, we actually get to a bigger and better place because of the interaction, rather than simply having to come up with all the answers for ourselves, I should say. And generally speaking, out there in the real world, there is collaboration that's necessary. You have to work with others. So it's good to be able to model that within a learning situation in any case. Now, when we talk about collaboration, it can be big collaboration or small collaboration, or as it suggests on the screen, micro or macro. When it comes to micro collaborations, this might be something as simple as likes or shares or retweets or comments on a post. So it's sort of low impact, but you're still collaborating with other people, still sharing ideas. And then macro collaboration is much more robust. And a good example again here is where people are doing problem solving tasks where they might have to actually have designated roles, and they have to fit those roles together to complete the overall task or the overall activity successfully. Think about games like Survivor and so forth, where as a team, they have to work together, otherwise they don't accomplish the task. But in doing so, there's also a lot they learn about themselves and their abilities to strive for a higher outcome there. And I think there's something that's mirrored in a lot of our courses where that could be of benefit. So I'm going to set a poll in just a moment, team, and ask you this question, which is, how often do you look to build collaboration into your own training situations? So that's on your screen now. Does this happen? Never. Sometimes, most of the time, or all of the time. Again, it's a totally anonymous thing, but it's interesting to get a sense for where your current practice is. How often are we looking to build in collaboration to your training? Let's give it one more opportunity, and I'll end that poll for you now. And sharing those results, folks, 50% of you who are joining us live are saying sometimes, 38% of you are saying most of the time, and there's one here, all of the time. Collaboration is king, and that's certainly an important part of it. Now, I understand that it does depend a lot on the subject matter, and some topics lend themselves to greater involvement than others. So, depending on that, I guess there's going to be a smattering. I'm super happy that no one said never, because certainly collaboration is a really important part of the learning process, even if it's to justify your own position because you get to bounce off somebody else. Number 5 on our list is this idea of community. And this is what brings it home. This is what adds extra commitment and connectedness to what we're trying to achieve. There's a couple of types or categories of community. You might have a community of learners that you extend using a microblogging service such as Yammer. This is a closed group, which means you can continue the dialogue outside of class or even after the conclusion of class, and they can share resources and ideas and problem solve. You almost get to crowdsource some of the issues or celebrate in the successes of other people in that particular network. Of course, you could use communities of practice here, and there's a whole range of LinkedIn groups that do this one. One of the top ones here in Australia is the National RTO Network. The guys at Velg Training, they manage that particular one there. They've got about 19,000 odd folks on there now. I think I took the screenshot a few years ago. But in this particular case, it means you've got access to a range of other like-minded people who do similar jobs to you, and it's a chance for you to, again, extend that dialogue outside of the classroom, not just with your peers, but with other people in the industry, which I think is entirely good. And then the third example here is the actual community, the end users. So in this gamification example we're seeing here, you've got people who are competing for charities based on what they do and how they perform. And, that's a good for the soul type thing. And for those that are unfamiliar with the shop kick guys, they are a company based here in the United States. And basically how it works is when you sign up, whenever you use the app and you shop somewhere, you get reward points for shopping. And then you also get reward points for giving ratings or reviews of certain products and so forth. And then you could trade those rewards in for gift cards. So you can either get gift cards to things like Starbucks or Walmart or any of those types of organizations, or you can choose to donate those to gift cards for your chosen charity. And those chosen charities can then push on and say, hey, listen, pick us. And we get a bit of a leaderboard here about how different organizations are going. So that's a way for us to actually have connectedness directly to our end users, the people we might serve in the community, as opposed to the community of our learners, if that makes some sense. Number 6 is all about leveling up. So if you've ever played games on your smartphones or traditional sort of console type games, you'd be familiar with the concept of completing a level, getting your prize or getting whatever other reward or accomplishment you get for that, and then you level up to the next one. Even though those early games like Pac-Man and so forth, you went to the next level and it got harder and faster and so forth. So again, it's not a new concept, but it's still a concept we should be trying to replicate in that learning situation. Remember, our focus today is a gamification crash course for learning. So we need to give people an opportunity to level up, to give them a chance to say, yes, we're going to acknowledge your success here. Now try to the next level. Now let's try for the next level. So we're stretching and pushing and motivating and inspiring people to continue to push upward and onward towards or above competency in our case. And we do that using rewards of all different types. We might allow them to unlock new content, maybe bonus material that maybe is not core content, but it's extra, that makes them feel good because they've got something that somebody else doesn't, or maybe access to new resources. So in some programs, in fact, they don't allow you to get the next module until they've completed all the tasks of the first one. So they actually lock that. Whereas other times you can swap and change and jump across whatever. The idea there is once you've got that sense of achievement, yes, you've got that, here's your congratulations. You might even get a digital badge or something for that. And then once you've got that, it unlocks the next stage, which then allows you to apply what you've learned in a different context, let's say. Which brings us to our final step of the 7, which is indeed evidence of accomplishments. Now, just a moment ago, I did mention the idea of digital badges, and this is one of the common ways that we can recognize people's accomplishment as they move through the different stages. We know on the national agenda now that micro-credentials is certainly a hot topic. So we might see more and more of this, idea of different entry points and exit points into our courses, and you get enough of these digital badges, then that gives you an actual credential or a skill set, and you get enough skill sets, then you get yourself a qualification. I think there's a lot to be said about the changing view of that across the vet sector. Now, one of the best in the business at this is an organization called Credly. They've probably been doing it longer than most. They are involved with not only creating those digital badges, but also in hosting them and then issuing them too. So ultimately here, what happens there is we would give the details of who should get the reward once it happens. And you can automate it too. Things like Canvas, for instance, you can automate it as soon as somebody is marked off at a certain level, then automatically they are issued via Credly a particular reward. And then they can use that however they like. They can use it as part of their personal branding. I've seen some people even put it on their LinkedIn profile to say, I've completed a certain delegation, let's say, or certification. And again, it's worth looking at. Now, it's not free. So you need to be aware that there's a cost, and that would need to be factored into your courseware and so forth. But it does take a lot of the heavy lifting out of it. So it may actually be cheaper because of that automation that happens. Of course, you can create your own badges and email them out and so forth. But this is a nice place as a third party to host it. I think it probably gives a bit more credibility too, because it's that third party. So if you want to learn more about Credly, check them out at www.credly.com. Now, I'm all about choice. So another way of looking at this is the folks at Open Badge Factory, and you can check them out at openbadgefactory.com. They do much the same sort of thing. They've been in the business quite a long time as well, and they're all about trying to create innovative ways to recognize people who have achieved, a range of outcomes in a learning context. We see this quite a bit in learning and development, but of course we can apply it in much the same way within our RTO settings. Again, they can be issued and manage those open badges, and they kind of host them on their site as well. And then the third example I've got for you is Accreditable. And you've got their website there, which is www.accreditable.com. And what I prefer about these ones is I really like their design process. You get a bit of insight from the image towards the bottom half of the page there, where you can go in there and you can change all the color schemes, the type of text that you want to use. You can put your own logos in there. I find that a little bit easier to use than the first two. Taking nothing away from the first two, they're amazing, but I do like the badge design feature that's in this particular program. Again, they all cost money and at different levels. So when you're checking these out, you might want to check out the free trials. They all have some really robust free trials, so you can try before you buy and see if this is the right solution for you and your business. So before we move any further, folks, I just want to get a sense for how many of you have used digital badges before. So launching a quick poll. So simple question, yes or no, have you used digital badges before within your training? And it just gives me an idea, I guess, of whether this is something that's already happening or something that you can move or pivot towards. So just ending that poll now. Now, 80% of those joining us live haven't used them before. So I guess there's some home play to check out one or more of those sites after today to see if there's a solution. Again, as I said, you can create your own. If you're with me earlier in the week, I even showed you how to do that on Monday. You can create your own editor situation. What I do like about those digital badge sites is that they create the links, they host them, they send them out, and you can put the plug-in into your learning management system where it automates the whole process, which I think is kind of cool. So I forgot to share the results so you can see them, that I wasn't making them up. So 80-20 split on this particular occasion. Let's make that disappear again. So I'd like to extend the discussion, team, and think about how else we could provide evidence of accomplishments. I've given you 3 examples of digital badges, but what are some other ways that you think, or even that you're currently using, that help you to provide the evidence of accomplishments that we could use in a gamification context? Let's remember what we're covering today. Whilst you're considering that, there's no doubt that a lot of RTOs have moved towards digital issuing of credentials, statements of attainment and qualifications, which makes them a lot easier to manage and add to things like e-portfolios. Nick says here, things like online quizzes with immediate feedback. So you can even have the virtual congratulations going and the streamers coming down and the sounds and the bells and the whistles. Deborah says, is this the same as rewards? Well, I'll talk specifically about rewards next, and you might be able to work out for yourself there. But generally speaking, the badge itself is an example of a reward, but what it does do is it sets the snapshot in time that says you have done everything you needed to achieve this accomplishment, and we're going to recognize that at this particular point. Here's your badge. A reward may be for different things. It may not simply be for accomplishment. It may be for effort. It may be about how much time you've spent there. It might be around attendance. You might have spent every day there, perfect attendance. You get your reward for that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're competent, if that makes some sense there. Phil says doing streams with a statement of attainment at the end of each block and then a certificate at the end of the course. So again, you get those different exit points where you could be giving them something which can continue to motivate them as they work their way through for the full qualification. And Danielle says here, in a game environment, allow things like avatar embellishments. And if you've seen anything on things like LinkedIn, I mean, there's folks, myself included, that may not update our images quite as quickly as we in fact age ourselves, and avatars are a great way of maybe adding some features that you'd like to have or that you once had to be a bit of fun. So it's a nice way of, again, getting buy-in and people feeling like they're part of the process rather than the learning happening to them. We want it to be happening with them. Okay, so that's an important distinction to make. And Mohammed says here, credit points to redeem later. So rather than getting a coffee voucher or something like that, you might be able to trade it in for other education related things within your own organization, ebooks and whatnot, or even credit towards another credential or qualification. So that's another way of continuing to keep people coming back. So I think that's a really clever idea. Now I'm going to move on to our next topic here, which is the 5 types of game rewards. Like I said in my introduction, not all of these will apply 100% to everybody's situation. It will depend on the cohort and the content, but I do want to give you some choices, and I'll give you some examples as we go through when it comes to planning the types of rewards that we may want to give. So the first type of reward is called a fixed action reward. If we go outside of education for a moment, a really good example of this is a coffee reward where you get a free coffee. Now you have to do something to get that coffee. If I buy 9 coffees, I will get the 10th one free. And that's why it's a fixed action. I know exactly at the very beginning what I have to do to get the outcome that I want. It's not dissimilar to frequent flyer programs, where I know if I fly certain sectors or in certain classes or I accrue certain points, then I'll go up a status level. And with each new status level, I get access to different rewards, or you know, I might get into the Qantas Club or something similar. So from that perspective there, I know what I have to do. And once I do it, I get the reward immediately. That's kind of the automatic approach that comes. Now, in an education context, you might get a status change from being a beginner to an expert. So as you go through certain things, you're then acknowledged for your achievement, for your time spent in the activities or in the course, and people start to you know, have that peacock moment where they get to put the feathers up and say, yep, I'm an expert now, which is great. And of course, an expert can become a master practitioner on something. So that might be its own reward, but you know what you have to do it. So there might be a certain amount of hours that you have to do. Like in some areas, it might be clinical hours. Once you've done those hours, then you get a new, you know, determination or delegation. The next type of reward is a random reward. And the best example of this one I can think of is the mystery box. Now, you can use this in lots of ways. We see the mystery box in a lot of these YouTube and TikTok videos where people don't know what they're competing for until they open the box. There was whole game shows on this as well, the money or the box. You might remember that from the 70s and 80s. But we could use this in education as well, where I sometimes use it in a class that we've got, which is the Train the Trainer boot camp. And rather than a mystery box, I call it our semi-valuable prize. You're not necessarily sure what it is, but you are competing for it. And at different times, you've got a chance to open it up and find out what you win. And sometimes in that particular context, it might be a book that's related maybe to the subject matter. It might be some resources. So we might have some stress balls, or I've got the soft dice, the big jumbo dice that trainers seem to like as a prize. Not super expensive. That's why it's called semi-valuable prize, but you have to be in it to win it. So the fact is you have to be back on time, or you have to be in the room, or you have to be involved in the activity in some way to be able to be eligible to take a random reward. And in a face-to-face context, often we'll pull the mystery box just to keep the energy level up. Oh, okay, let's do a quick mystery box drawing. What have we won here? Now, connected to this is rather than the mystery box, that way you might have rolling rewards, like pull a name out of the hat. So everyone who's actually in the class, either for real, in person, or virtually, has their name in the draw, and at different times, they have a chance to take out an award. So the variation this time might be those semi-valuable prizes in a classroom. I've got it at the side of the room. So I've got my books and my toys and maybe some highlighters. We've got the Mr. Sketch pens, which are also super popular amongst our attendees. And then as we pull a name out of the hat, they can go to the prize table and pick a prize of their choice. Again, it adds energy and interest to what's going on, or it might be a winning team. So we might compete at different levels for different activities or quizzes as we go through, and the team with the most points gets to go to the prize table first. Like I said, wholesome competition is, I'd let everybody go to the prize table eventually, but those who get past the gate first get the best value, semi-valuable prizes, if there's such a thing, but they get the first choice, if nothing else. And by having them on the table the whole day, they get a chance to look at them during the break times. Oh, I wouldn't mind that book, or I wouldn't mind that resource. So that might actually spur that competition angle on again even further. Now, if you are doing things online like we are today, you might want to choose an online version of pulling a name out of the hat. And I've got 3 for you to think about today. The first one is Wheel of Names. Which, as the name suggests, you put all the names, you spin the wheel, and whatever the name comes up is our winner. Then you've got random.org, which allows you to pick a random number, and whoever has that number is our winner, amongst a whole range of other random things you can use. We actually use random.org to identify random selections when we do assessment validation. So we'll put all the numbers in from the sample size, and then we'll use random.org to let us know which of the samples we're going to take. So that's another free bonus bit of information for you today. And then another one that's kind of cool is Raffle Copter. So if you're giving away prizes and you want to automate that one, you can put the prizes there. Raffle Copter does the heavy lifting, and particularly if they're e-prizes, it can also distribute those prizes after the lucky person has won. So 3 different ways of managing those rolling rewards. The next category is social rewards. So in this case, it's allowing people to have likes and comments and shares and retweets. And you might have a competition where the person with the most likes could also win a reward. And that's a way for people to have that sense of competition, but also a collaboration there, because you might be wanting to really support your colleague there and go, okay, well, we want to make sure we're their advocate and their champion. Let's keep moving them along. It's all a bit of fun in the end, but there's something about the idea of the likes and whatnot that makes people feel good about themselves. You know this at Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and so forth. And when somebody likes your post, you feel good because you know that they've taken the time to read what you've had to say. And the same thing is true when we're talking about learning. And then the final example here is prize pacing rewards. Now, what we're seeing on the screen right now is actually examples of some digital badges. But how this happens here is that you can't get the second one until you've achieved the first one. So it's pacing when the rewards come. And then if you get the complete set, then you get the overall success of your program. And we know that people, humans, they love to collect the sets, generally speaking. You think about the McDonald's monopoly, the popularity of that, and the Woolworths have those Ushies or the Oshies. And then you go back to, again, my childhood, we had the sports cards. You had Pokemon Go craze. It's all about collecting the set of things. And as humans, we love completedness. So we want to get all the bits and pieces, then they come together, and that in itself becomes a motivating factor. Now, a way that this has been created in the example on the screen here is this is part of an e-learning program where they have to complete each of these different tasks, but they have to do it in order. And then once they've got them all, it unlocks the next. Sorry, once they've got one, it unlocks the next one, and they complete the task. And once they've done them all, they get their final reward. So they've got to do a whole range of different scenarios to make that happen. And just going back to the chat box there, Mohammed's also said there is a LinkedIn recommendation provides an excellent example of where people feel good when other people have taken the time to write a recommendation or talk about the skills that you have. Now, the final example here is Jason and myself. Jason also works for me. We ran a session yesterday as part of our webinar week. Is an example of a face-to-face conference we were at a couple of years ago. This is Beth in the center. And I'm not sure you can see it so well on your screens, but she has a name tag and it's got like a sticker for every different workshop that she's done with that organization. And she just gets that when she comes in, and she feels tremendously proud that she has accomplished all of these different certificate programs and just wears them with a literal badge of honor. So just it reminds us that people actually get a sense of pride when they're able to complete those things, and it does spur them on. Now, we're just over 3/4 of our way through the webinar, folks. I want to give you your 30 seconds of Zen, a quick stretch break. I'll grab a mouthful of water, and then we'll finish our final 10 minutes in just a sec. So hopefully you've stretched it out, folks. You've done your power Pilates, and everything is as it should be now for our final 10 minutes of the webinar. Now, our first topic after the break is gamification platforms. We've talked about the rewards. We've talked about the 7 steps. Let's look at some programs that will allow you to manage this and create them. The first one is actually a really, really cool platform. It's called Umu. What I love about this is its free version is really, really good. It allows you to have up to 3 courses completely free, and is great for that micro-credentialing type stuff as well. But it has all the features. So you can have all the games, all the tests, all the checking for understanding, all the matching tasks. It's just a really great platform. Of course, once you've got your 3 filled, if you want any more, you have to pay, or you have to delete 1 or more of the 3 that you've got. But what it does do is it gives you a chance to have a solid play before you put any skin in the game with the cash. I don't even think the pricing's so bad, but again, free is better than cost. And if it's a sort of thing where you only need a few programs to make this happen, then why pay additional when you don't need to? So I'd be checking that out. I'll give you all the URLs at the end, by the way, so you can check those out later. To give you an idea here, this is the example of what it looks like inside. You can sort of see here that it not only gamifies the learning, it also gamifies for the developers. So here's my profile there. And when I do certain things, like when I add something, or if I do an induction, or I watch a video about how to use a particular feature, it will give me points, and that allows me to raise my level up. And everybody knows kind of what levels people are at. So in this particular case here, we can see exactly where people are performing, how engaged they are in the program, and we can then set points for a whole range of different activities, such as watching a video, commenting on a post, adding your own post. You might get extra bonus points for being the winning team as part of a quiz. You get points for taking the quiz, and so on and so forth. And again, like anything else, you might want to be competing against other people in your organization. So you'll do some of the bonus activities so you can get extra points to raise yourself up on the leaderboard, which again helps to reinforce the learning and contributes to the overall success of the program. Another one of my favorite platforms is called Quizalize. And during the pandemic, it really came alive. So like Zoom was to the webinar space or the virtual meeting space, Quizalize really took up, and a lot of schools around the world took on Quizalize. And in preface to Kahoot, which is very popular as well. It does much the same sorts of things as Kahoot. I think the big difference, though, and what I like about Quizalize is the back-end analytics. It really helps me to do a deep dive, to go in who's struggling, how many attempts people have made, how quick they're answering some of those responses, like are they guessing or are they hitting those answers straight away? And then, and this is the really cool thing, what it does allow you to do is it allows you to assign differentiated follow-up activities. So if somebody doesn't go so well on the first quiz, they're then pushed a different set of content and a different set of activities to help reinforce and upskill them or extend their knowledge, and then they can take another quiz down the track. So I really like that feature of Quizalize, and I do think it's good learning practice. Rather than everybody doing a one-size-fits-all, it does become a choose your own adventure. Mohammed's asked the question in the chat box, is it a platform like Zoom? It's not a webinar platform per se. Of course, you can share it like we are. I'm sharing my PowerPoint slide today via Zoom, so I can share it like that via Zoom. It's a web-based platform, and you can use it in real time too. But it's not Zoom in the same sense. You would need to have another program that actually pushes that out, that broadcasts that for you. If we were there at the same time. So if I needed to be with you during the quiz, like I am today, then I'm with you. Otherwise, if they're doing it self-paced, then it just runs online like any other program does. And I am all about choice, as you probably worked out already today. And the last one I wanted to share with you is one that I really like as well. It's just called Aha Slides. I've recently found out about this one. And again, I like this one because of its integration. So it integrates into PowerPoint. So I can do this live into PowerPoint with some of these Aha Slides. It also, in the paid version, the premium version, allows you to integrate straight into Zoom. So to go on to what Mohammed was saying before in the chat box, hey, if you want something that seamlessly allows you to create some of these gamified processes and activities within a meeting platform, then this is really worth a look. The free version doesn't let you do that, so they're not giving up all their IP, but the paid for version is very, very good and worth a look at. But you can try the other stuff, to see what it looks like outside of Zoom. And see if you think that would be something you'd like at a meeting. So here's the example of some of the things that are happening there. So you can have things like your real-time surveying, and they've got the results that are happening there. So again, unlike the single way that we do it with our polling, you can get the pie charts and the bar graphs and all this sort of stuff. We can also run the quizzes straight away and have our leaderboards there and congratulate our lucky winners. And then we can also do a different thing with the chats. So rather than simply being a linear chat, we can turn some of the information of our chat into word clouds that appear on the screen as well. So again, I think there's some really cool things that are happening there with the Aha Slides as a result. So those links I promised before, we've got Umu, we've got Quizalize and Aha Slides. What I've tried to do today is to give you things that you may not have seen before. I know there's other things out there in the marketplace, but I do like these. I do think they do a great job, and you've got some really robust free options to try it out. But also wanted to give you something new too. So hopefully there's one or more there that you haven't seen before that will give you some home play after today. So in the end, folks, as part of our time together, we put all of the information together and we can start to map ourselves a gamification journey. So to go back to those 7 key things we talked about before as part of our summary, the first key step there was transparency. So in mapping our journey there, we'll want to think about that wireframe or flow chart or a map that gives people an idea of what's happening in that gaming journey. The next step there on our path are the goals. And this time we'll want to think about the program goals versus the learner or even the group goals that might be held. And when we say group, that might be the organization they come from, not just the members of the group. The next destination is the competition. And again, is it individual based? So person against person, mate against mate, state against state, as the case might be. Is it a team-based thing, or do you want them to compete against their own personal bests? So they're kind of competing against themselves. Next, we've got collaboration. We said this was super important, one of the most important steps on our 7 there. And I mentioned today we've got micro collaboration as well as macro collaboration. So the micro stuff is the likes, the shares, the comments. The macro is the robust teamwork required to complete a problem-solving task, as one example. Next on our destination map here, we've got community. So again, when it comes to community, you might have the posts, that you push out there. You might share that. You might crowdsource answers. We see a lot of organizations now are using crowdsourcing as a way to get more information and more problem solving done from a wider audience. It's also much more cost effective from the organization's perspective. Next on our journey is the leveling up. And from this perspective, you want to think about what happens at the end of each segment of that game or of the game of learning. So is there a chance for them to unlock the next content? As we mentioned before, you might lock it and then it unlocks itself. You might have bonus information or perhaps some extra rewards there. And then the final part of the magical mystery tour here is the evidence of accomplishment. I think it's really important that people have something at the end that demonstrates that they were successful at that particular game and the learning that's come from that. And today we talked about digital badges. We've also talked about things like certification or delegations, where we might change the title from beginner to expert to master practitioner. So I know we've just hit top of the hour, folks, but here's your opportunity to ask any final questions and think about the actions you're going to take as a result of our time together. So I'm happy for you to think either or. So if there's any final questions about our topic today, feel free to pop them in the chat box. Otherwise, consider your next steps. What are you going to do with our content today? What's one thing that you think is going to have an impact on your own training and assessment as a result of our time together? Feel free to add that to your chat box as well. And while you're thinking about that, folks, if you haven't already signed up for our final 2 webinars this week, tomorrow, Damien takes you through the Online Trainers Toolkit, strategies to engage in live and online training. And on Friday, I'm back again with digital resources that give your training the wow factor. You can check that out on our website and look forward to checking you out down the track. Now, going back to the chat box here, Phil says, looking at the AHA slides, checking it out now. Hopefully it serves you well and creates a unique experience for you and your learners. That's a great takeaway from today. So thanks for that one, Phil. If there are any other ideas, any takeaways, any actions, feel free to pop them in now. Otherwise, team, thanks for playing. Nick says here, my next step is to review the online quizzes or games with those 7 steps in mind. I think that's an excellent idea, Nick, and I look forward to hearing how it goes for you. So all my details are on the screen there. Let me know how it goes in the end. And Mohammed says, game rewards is an excellent way of really motivating people and making them part of the learning, not just something that's a drive-by shooting. Sometimes it happens. Deborah says, I include games and sessions rather than actual courses. So it has given me some thoughts on the why and the how. And in some cases, it might also help you to justify to other decision makers above you in your organization why this is such an important thing. And you've got a structure now to maybe put it into practice and make it work more successfully for you in the future. Now, if you do have any other questions down the track, all my details are on the screen now. Feel free to email me your questions. It's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Otherwise, thanks for spending an hour with me and investing in your own PD today. And we look forward to checking you out again on another Mr. Wed event. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the hump day that it is, and have a safe rest of the week. We'll catch you next time.